Is Deadlock dying? This is a question a lot of people are asking right now. A lot of people are typing it in my chat. And I wanted to make a video where we discuss this question as well as the state of this game as a whole. Before we have to go into exactly that question, we have to go through some facts. One of those facts is that the player count has definitely peaked in September and gone on a downwards slope since then. Before that, there was a very small group of people testing the game throughout, but then it suddenly spiked a lot in September. And there are a lot of questions on people's minds is that like, is the game not good enough? Why is it going so much down? And I have a lot of theories behind this that I want to discuss with you guys and share. And the first one is that I don't think Valve intended to make this game quote unquote public this early. I think it was because of pressure from the community, including myself as streamers, because we were all playtesting this game in a private server, and it felt kind of silly that the game wasn't even allowed to be talked about or streamed anywhere. So the way I see this was that we kind of forced Valve's hand. And the only reason why I think this happened was because the game was so damn good that even though it was invite only, the player base kept increasing and increasing to the point where they were like, well, there's no point in like not allowing people to stream it and make YouTube videos out of it because everybody quote unquote knows about it already. But here's the issue with that. Because of all the attention the game is now getting, suddenly you're kind of on the clock. Because now suddenly the player base explodes up to 171,000 players. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for a game in development because now they have tons of guinea pigs to test out all their changes and they can speed up the progress of the game development. But here's where I think it's not good. And that is exactly the same thing. When your hand is forced, it means that now you're on a timer. When this game was in early development and they were like, you know, a couple thousand people playing it in a private Discord and giving feedback and stuff, they could do this for years if they wanted to until they had a game that they felt was good enough to release. But now, because the game is already out there, and it already got tons of exposure before it even had a ranked system, it now feels like it's hard to keep all those players. Here's the thing, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think a game in early development has to keep a player base of hundreds of thousands of players. I think that we currently have like 37,000 concurrent players peak. That is more than a lot of early access games can even dream of, and that's even a contender for one of the top games on Steam, even at its current state. But the problem is that people always compare it to the highest amount of player count it's ever been, which is why a lot of people are coming into my chat and they're asking like, is the game dying? What's going on? And I just think that it's a little bit unfair because the way I see it, the game isn't even alive. It's not even published. It doesn't have a monetization system. It doesn't have progression system. You can't even just click download and play it on Steam. It's not been promoted by Valve at all either. And some people have countered this argument by saying, but hey, Valve doesn't really promote Counter-Strike either, or didn't promote Dota either. Yes and no. You can't really compare it to a game that isn't even in open beta. And Valve supports all these esports tournaments, which we're going to go back to later, and how the esports tournaments affect the popularity of the game as a whole. There's never been a single ad for Deadlock anywhere so far, except a small clip on the international finals, which was kind of funny actually. The second thing I want to talk about is the patch frequency. So every second Thursday, there is a large patch for Deadlock. And on Twitter, there's been a lot of outrage from Counter-Strike 2 players and fans who feel like Deadlock is getting way too much focus from Valve, because even on the 2-year anniversary for CS2, there was just like a small cosmetic update, whereas we get huge changes every 2 weeks. Now, this is really good because it means that there's always something to come back to for players, because when a game is in early development, there's less accessible content than a finished game. And this is one of the reasons why the player base now is dropping, because after this initial boom, now comes the grinding phase. Now the developers are constantly making changes, constantly preparing the game for an eventual open beta and an eventual launch. And the people that are left are basically here to test the game and figure out what we like and what we don't like and then give feedback on it. So I think the patch frequency is great, especially for a content creator like myself as well. There's always tier lists you can make. There's always patch reviews you can make. And the meta shifts a lot just within the span of 2 weeks, which I think is great because people need to realize that the finished game is probably going to look nothing like what the game currently looks like. I will say the one thing I don't like about the community as a whole is this constant doom-saying of games that are not finished. So it seems to me now in 2024, it's almost like people want games to fail. People go like, this game is dead. Oh, why is there nobody watching this game on Twitch? What's going on? And I just feel like it's completely unfair to the game and the developers as a whole because the game is simply not finished. So a game can't be dead when it's not even alive yet. Of course, it's never a good thing that a player base drops, but I think it's completely expected because the majority of people playing this game are not going to be constantly grinding a game that isn't finished because there isn't enough to keep them there. There's no monetization, there's no progression. There's not a very functional rank system yet, which we're going to talk about next. So one thing that happened after the player base suddenly became huge was that a lot of people were asking for a ranked system. So before that, it was only a skill-based matchmaking casual queue that everybody played in, but they became fairly competitive eventually because it was the only queue we had. And then they announced ranked and people were, oh my God, we can get ranked and now we can play together. And I think one question that a lot of people had was the ranked system released too early? Because it splits up the player base. So when you have suddenly so many people playing the game, suddenly you're like, okay, maybe we make multiple modes. Maybe that will keep the players there. The problem with this is once that player base starts to go down again a bit, you suddenly get in a situation where the very high rank players will get very uneven matches, extremely long queue times, and there was solo queue only, which I think, me personally, I really didn't enjoy because I had a lot of friends that I used to play with, and then suddenly we were all just playing by ourselves, and it didn't really feel as inclusive, and we ended up just playing the casual queue anyway, and the match quality was almost the same. So then the solution was to just smash those systems, those two modes into one. Obviously, this is a result of the player base going back down and people also complaining about just a lot of things like long queue times and not being able to play with our friends. The problem with this is that now people have gotten used to ranked and now they feel like they can't play casually in the quote-unquote casual mode because it's also the ranked mode at the same time. But, and this might be a hot take, to me, it seems like we've actually just gone back to the mode that we had before, except now people actually get badges that represent their MMR. It's still the same casual game. You can choose whether or not you want your rank to show or not. It's just that now it actually shows it on the screen. So we are back to the mode that everybody used to play. It's just that now it tells you if you're trolling your elo, essentially. So I don't think people would have complained about this if it wasn't for the fact that we were given ranked system and then we went back again. But I think that because the player base now is lower than it was during that like huge exposure where all the news outlets were talking about the games and stuff, it just makes more sense to not split up the player base too much. I think this is going to cause some outrage, especially for low to mid elo players, because there's going to be a lot of trolling there. People are going to take it less seriously, or people are going to try new builds that are probably not as good. And then the other half of players are probably going to try to lock in and they're going to communicate and they're going to try their best to win. I think in high MMR, that's not as much of a problem because I think in most cases people will be trying because that's why they are that rank. So you can also say that this is like survival of the fittest / Darwinism, where eventually if you try hard enough, you will be placed in a rank where you play with other people who will also try hard. But I think that's just one of the challenges of having a game that is in early access. When is the right time to release ranked? What kind of state should the ranked system be in? And is it worth it to split up the player base if that means that the queue times and game quality now becomes lower in both respective game modes? So for now, I think this is the correct situation, even though it's not ideal. I just think that this means that Valve doesn't have to rely on having a big player base to keep developing the game and having good match quality, because even I notice now that even though ranked is gone, I'm noticing a lot of the time that I'm a much higher rank than the rest of the people in my lobby. And I think that's what's going to happen at the statistical outliers, which will affect match quality a little bit. But again, I think this is like currently the best scenario we have to deal with, even though I do see the negative side effects that a lot of people, especially in low to mid elo, are struggling with. Another thing I wanted to talk about is esports. So Valve has both Dota 2 and Counter-Strike, two very successful top 5 esports in the world. There's a very high chance that Deadlock might be in that kind of same ecosystem eventually. We've already seen a plethora of smaller tournaments come out, like Fight Night, and there's like weekly tournaments, and there's already professional casters from many other games like Uber and DDK and Jason Kaplan and ZP, all these guys. And it's clear that there is like a kind of like a grassroots esports scene that wants this game to grow and wants this game to be a competitive esports scene. And I do think that when the time is right, the Valve is going to completely back that up with prize pool money and framework to actually have proper tournaments. And I think that's where a lot of this game's popularity is going to rely on. How much of this game will be an actual esport? Because I don't think Valve will spend this much resources on a game unless they're planning to make it into an esports title. Because one of the other arguments that people have said is that, well, there have been other Valve games like Artifact and Dota Underlords, I think it was called, that didn't really succeed. But I also do feel like the budgeting to those games compared to this game, especially with this being like a very like 6v6 MOBA shooter esport, like this is like a genre defining title. It's much bigger than a board game or a card game, in my opinion. So I don't think it's fair to compare them to that. And Valve is lucky to be in a position where they can develop the game for as long as they want because they have enough money, so they don't have to release it early if the game isn't in the state they want it to be. Like they can wait until they feel like the game is good enough before they will release it. And when they do, they have Steam, the world's biggest gaming access platform, to promote their game on, and you'll probably see the player count go up a lot again, even in open beta, I do believe, because like even the fact that you have to ask someone for an invite because it's closed, I think that has a lot to say about what kind of player base we have compared to just having a publicly accessible open beta that you can just click and then you can play like an hour later or whatever. Yeah, so that's why I don't take these Steam charts as seriously as a lot of other people. Of course, I'm a little bit biased because I basically put all my eggs in one basket. I left Valorant for this game, so I will be doing everything I can to grind the game and to promote it through my platforms. And there is no secret that my success is also connected to this game's success as a whole, which means, of course, I want to do my part. But I also do believe that this is one of the best games I've ever tried. And I think that this is the first time we see this kind of MOBA crossover that I feel like Smite didn't do as well. I feel like Smite just took a MOBA and just made it into third person. They didn't like redesign it from scratch. It just felt like a normal MOBA where they just moved up the camera. Whereas Deadlock has like added tons of verticality and movement and a lot of unique twists, which is why I feel like this game will really define this kind of third person MOBA genre in a way that Smite was not able to do. So I am not very worried, to be honest, because it is very healthy for a game to be in the Valve ecosystem just because they can use all these other games like Counter-Strike and Dota to promote the game. They can also use the Steam platform and they also have resources to host tournaments to make this game big. But we don't know when that's going to be. There is no timeline. We don't know when it's coming out. We just got to be patient. And we just got to be very good at testing the game, giving feedback so that they can hurry their asses up and make this game into an open beta so a lot of more players will join. And I do think that they probably pushed the ranked system out a little bit too early as a result of all the pressure from people. First, the pressure from people opening up the game to the public in a way that we were allowed to stream, make YouTube videos. And so a lot more people knew about the game. But then also as a result, all these new players now also felt like they needed something to keep them there. So now that they're kind of back on the grind with like a more steady player base, we kind of just got to be on the lookout for these bi-weekly updates and see whenever the game really makes a big step in the right direction, which can be any time. Suddenly we have like completely game-changing updates within just a span of 2 weeks, and everybody's like, oh my God, the game is back. And that's what's so interesting about being part of a game in early development as well. It's just that you have no idea what this game is going to look like when it's finished, but it's so cool to be part of the process. It's so cool that like when they made the Bebop changes, a lot of those changes were suggested by me and people from our community. And it's cool that we are able to just like help them make this game better. It's a really cool feeling. One of the last things I wanted to talk about, because I've been yapping for a little bit now, is monetization. If you've looked in-game, there is an equipment tab, except it's empty because right now they are not making any money from the game whatsoever. I am pretty sure that they will enable some sort of skin system. Maybe it's like the Dota 2 system where each hero has different body parts. They can add helmets and weapons and armors and whatnot, especially because one big difference for this game compared to Counter-Strike is that it's a third-person shooter, which means that you can have skins for every body part on each character, and they're all visible. Whereas Counter-Strike is locked to just weapons and knives and gloves, essentially. So I am almost 100% certain that they will make a skin system that is similar to Dota, where you can just mix and match different hats or whatever and equip them and then buy and sell them on the Steam market, which is the exact same ecosystem that both Dota and Counter-Strike has. And it makes Valve a lot of money, so why wouldn't they do it? So yeah, that is my current take on the question of whether or not is Deadlock dying. I wanted to make this video for quite a while because I see this question a lot and I have a lot of opinions about it, but it's like a little bit hard to just say it all every time the question is asked. I do think that people might worry a little bit too much, and there's definitely a trend of like doomsaying games before they're even launched. And I think in some cases, people just have to be patient. And it's not like we know that the game's gonna be a huge success. We can only hope. But I do believe it will be because the game is so damn good. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below what you think about the game's state, what you would see from the game as an improvement. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content as always. Thank you very much for watching.